I don't normally make response videos, but I've received so many requests to look at this particular video that I figured, what the hell, let's try something different. Remember the FiveWhoFans? You know, the ones that many people think parodied this channel last month? Well, they're back with a video with so many naive assumptions and clueless unsupported theories that it's actually kind of humorous. Now, of course, this isn't meant to be an attack on them personally, but rather an analysis of the video. So, let's take a look at what they have to say.
If any of you Doctor Who fans have the misfortune of owning a Facebook account, you might have noticed that almost every post from the Doctor Who page, regardless of how relevant it is, will usually be accompanied by comments from angry men and women declaring that they're no longer going to watch Doctor Who, that they're sick of agenda pushing, that they believe Chris Chibnall is on a mission to run the ratings and, by extension, the show into the ground. Or maybe a combination of all three. It might seem at times that such people are in the majority, but thankfully, this simply isn't the case. The guilty party here is actually Facebook's algorithm. Comments that receive more reactions than replies tend to be pushed to the top, and Doctor Who fans, and humans in general, love a good argument. Hence why you might be under the impression that the fan base is universally unhappy with Jodie Whittaker's casting and the prospect of Series 11. Controversy sparks outrage, and outrage sparks attention. It would be wrong of me to suggest that these people don't exist though, so I'd like to spend this video addressing them, and how they might have been misinformed.
Well, no, it's not just Facebook's algorithm that's inventing stuff. Many people do have legitimate reasons for concern about how the casting of the 13th Doctor was handled. Also, nobody said that the majority of people were against the casting of Jodie Whittaker, but to say that there isn't a significant proportion of the fan base that is against this decision simply isn't true. By most accounts, it seems to be about a third, which isn't unsubstantial. Yes, there are some that are genuine misogynists, but they are in the minority. Put simply, most people that are expressing opposition to the 13th Doctor are doing so because they don't like agenda pushing, and we've seen plenty of that in Doctor Who in recent years. The next clip is going to show a fundamental problem with this video. Note how broadly feminism is defined, including the textbook definition of feminism that every bedroom feminist uses. Pulled right from Google definitions.
Feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the ground of the equality of the sexes. With any ideology, though, it can be split into several movements, waves, and subcategories. Some are good, some are not, but in the broadest possible sense, it simply means equality. Many are put off and confused by the fact that feminism uses the word feminine, implying that one gender is better than the other, but that's not the case. It all comes down to context. Historically, it was only fairly recently that women were able to get the vote, and various movements since have allowed for steps towards fair pay, receiving education, equal rights within marriage, the list goes on. And it's still not over. True equality has not really been achieved at this point. I'm currently writing this video in Northern Ireland, where it's still not possible to get an abortion without getting sent to prison. Some misogynistic behaviour is so normalised that it's become difficult for people to identify, in the same way that it was acceptable to say and do things a few decades ago that most of us wouldn't dream of now. On a side note, to those that declare I'm not a feminist, I'm an egalitarian, egalitarianism encompasses equality of races and genders alike, so technically you're just saying you're a feminist alongside other nice things. Well done you. Of course, at this point, we're just slipping into semantics, so I'll stop there.
No, you can't just gloss over defining your central topic. This is much too broad. If your focus is supposed to be on disproving the notion that Doctor Who is a feminist program, then you have already failed. You haven't really said anything about what feminism actually is, other than a wide-reaching comment that it's been divided into 3 waves, but you haven't clarified what each of these waves were, nor have you mentioned the time frame during which each occurred. You really haven't told us anything here, and these facts might be kind of important, so let's clarify this a bit. First wave feminism occurred around the turn of the 20th century and was primarily focused on getting the vote. Your claim that women recently got the vote, in the Western world anyway, is simply inaccurate. In most Western countries, women have had the vote for nearly a century. You also haven't taken into account that it wasn't long before women got the vote that all men over a certain age got the right to vote. Previously, a prerequisite was land ownership or military service. This is important contextual information. Second wave feminism, which occurred in the 1960s, dealt with the remaining inequalities between men and women, and centered mainly on rights in the home, workplace, and reproductive rights, all of which were successful, with a few small exceptions in certain jurisdictions. I'll touch on this later. From this point on, men and women were equal before the law in the Western world. The aims of feminism had largely been accomplished. Now, let's look at your assertion on equal pay. Men and women do have equal pay. It's illegal to pay someone less for the same job. It's not a pay gap. but an earnings gap, and this has been covered over and over again. The idea that women are paid less is based on an aggregate of the population as a whole. It does not take into account types of work, and while women are given advantages in higher paid fields through equity programs that openly discriminate against men, they still exhibit a tendency to go into lower paid professions. They also, in general, work fewer hours and don't ask for as much when negotiating salaries or raises. All these factors are completely in their control. As for marriage, you are correct in saying that it's not equal. Most men have very little control when it comes to marriage, which becomes clear when you look at divorce. Divorce courts are generally one-sided, and the children, house, etc. are generally awarded to the woman, while the man gets the honor of paying for it. Now back to a major point of clarification that is lacking in this video. The type of feminism that has infested Doctor Who in recent years is not first or second wave feminism, it's actually third wave feminism. Since you don't really define what it is, here's a clip from Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa to clarify things for us.
As feminists have been hugely successful in equating feminism with support for women's equality. So to say you're anti-feminist seems to suggest that you are opposed to women's equality. But if feminism ever was about equality, and that's an interesting subject for another video, it emphatically no longer is. In the 21st century, feminism is about special privileges and advantages for women and special exemptions from responsibility. So I am happy to claim the badge of anti-feminism because I object to an ideology and a practice that sets one standard for women, supposedly because they are victims, and one harshly punitive standard for men, supposedly because they are privileged. All fair-minded people should object to unjust double standards. The dishonesty and hypocrisy of the feminist movement deserve to be exposed and denounced every day.
An important point of clarification is that feminism and women are not the same thing. One is an ideology, and the other is one of two genders. This is an important distinction that often gets muddled. Indeed, women are often some of the most vocal critics of third-wave feminism. As for abortion in Northern Ireland, this is the one instance where I will give you some slack, although I should note that I have no strong views on abortion one way or the other. Answer me this, though. Is there not an inherent contradiction in social justice when it comes to abortion? I mean, shouldn't a fetus's right to live be a human rights issue? Just saying. Now, onto the video's central piece of evidence. To use an SJW term, it's somewhat problematic.
Does Doctor Who have a feminist agenda? I'm about to blow your mind here by proving you right. Yes, Doctor Who has a feminist agenda. It has an egalitarian agenda, but not in the way that you think. It's a show that sees the importance in the equality of all life, and it's been that way for the most part since its beginnings in 1963. The Daleks have always been intolerant cyborgs hell-bent on the destruction of all other lifeforms, deeming themselves superior. And despite a few inconsistencies early on, the Doctor has risen to face them. By the time we get to the Daleks' invasion of Earth, the Doctor has defined himself as their enemy. And of course, the antithesis of Daleks are the values of equality, ergo feminism, ergo agenda.
No, the Daleks were meant to be a metaphorical representation of Nazis. You know, real Nazis, not what SJWs call Nazis, which is, anybody that disagrees with them. Disagreement was quite low on the list of atrocities committed in Adolf Hitler's Germany. I think we can all agree that the aims of the Third Reich were a bit twisted and evil, to say the least. There is a big difference between this and sexist food portions. Also, the Daleks aren't real. So at least they have that in common with the gender pay gap. So this is how you intended to blow my mind. Really, good lord.
Now, when Jodie was first announced, Chris Chibnall said, "I always knew I wanted the 13th Doctor to be a woman." Some fans were concerned that only female actors were auditioned, rather than a combination of males and females. After all, isn't that what equality is all about? But Chibnall is well within his rights to audition only female actors. If he pictured the 13th Doctor as female, a possibility that was established from the Doctor's wife and never contradicted prior, it would be rather strange to cast male actors. As far as Chibnall was concerned, this incarnation was a female character, in the same way that, say, Hermione Granger is a female character.
Actually, only considering one gender, to prove how superior or virtuous one is at the behest of discriminatory BBC policies does give fans legitimate reason for concern. Also, gender-changing Time Lords were not a thing until Stephen Moffat decided to make it a thing, and arguments about sexist casting before this era are redundant. It was never contradicted prior because it was never a thing. Now, let's look at the next piece of evidence.
I wish this point could arise in every single one of my videos, so it is with undisguised enthusiasm that I say, let's have a look at Series 1. The 2005 series, starring Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, provided one of the show's strongest outings to date, partly down to the fact that there was a high degree of uncertainty as to whether they'd be able to create anything beyond those 13 45-minute episodes. It was lightning in a bottle, consistently fantastic, haha, and there's been nothing like it since. It also starred John Barrowman, who played the show's first openly pansexual character, a transgender villain in the form of Cassandra, and a multitude of gay, female, and ethnic role models, something that the show would continue to build upon in the following years. On paper, one might say that this looks like box ticking, but it isn't. Cassandra's motives are completely unrelated to her being transgender. In fact, it's addressed in a throwaway line that's treated with little in the way of a fanfare. And Captain Jack's pansexuality, whilst an integral part of his character and identity, in no way overshadows the stories being told. Storytelling is prioritized above all else. There is no agenda beyond allowing representation to provide real, relatable characters from all walks of life. It seems strange that it's only recently, rather than 13 years ago, that Doctor Who has been accused of pandering to social justice, when really, since its revival, it's always been a show with progressive tendencies. But I put that down to the current political climate, where strong divides between left and right have led to unwarranted accusations that wouldn't have been considered just a decade prior.
Yes. The way representation was handled in the RTD era made a lot of sense, and actually serves as an effective contrast to demonstrate just how polarizingly political the show became during Moffat's final few series. Cassandra was not agenda-pushing, it was intended as a joke. Now, as you have decided to focus on sexual orientation, let's compare the characters of Jack and Bill. Yes, Captain Jack was bisexual, or pansexual, whatever the hell that means, I really don't care. In fact, this was introduced in his first scene. If his development had only stayed there, then yes, we could say that he was only there to fill a quota, except for the fact that such a quota didn't really exist in 2005, or 2004 when this was originally filmed. Jack's sexuality was not his defining characteristic. Yes, it was there, but he was a well-written character. There was depth and character development. In fact, he's one of my favorite New Who characters, and I personally think that Torchwood is better than anything Doctor Who has produced in recent years. RTD has also been very open about being a gay man. This was not really virtue signaling. He was writing about what he understood. The Capaldi years were very much about virtue signaling on the part of Stephen Moffat, and this is one of the primary reasons for the show losing popularity at such an alarming rate. Just look at the massive ratings drop. Bill's character arc seemed to be based solely upon her demographic representation. While yes, Captain Jack's sexuality was included at various points throughout Doctor Who and Torchwood, and yes, at times it was a bit heavy-handed, he didn't need to remind us at every opportunity about his sexual orientation. Whereas during Series 10, the audience was constantly beat over the head with Bill's orientation. Captain Jack also had a very clear arc, which played out on screen over a period of 6 years and is still being played out through Big Finish audios. He was a deeply flawed character during Season 1, and a character that was fundamentally changed through traumatic events that would occur later. Bill, on the other hand, did not have much of a character arc, and this was probably not helped by the fact that her arc took place during what is possibly the worst series of Doctor Who ever. Unlike Jack, she was not really a flawed character, and there wasn't much, if any, development from the beginning to the end of her arc. I think this only further goes to prove the SJW narrative. If she had been introduced as flawed, then the pitchforks would have come out. Bill largely was there to tick boxes. As another example, I would also like to look at how race was handled in both eras, because there is a distinct difference between the Davies and Moffat era. If you were to believe the press, you'd think that Bill was the first non-white companion in the history of Doctor Who, but of course, this wasn't accurate, now was it? Like Captain Jack, both Martha Jones and Mickey Smith were well fleshed out characters. They both had clear arcs that were not based upon their demographic representation, and they are also two of my favorite Doctor Who companions. In fact, a line from Martha in Smith and Jones perfectly demonstrates how Doctor Who was not really a social justice program during the RTD era. She tells the Doctor that the title of Doctor is something that should be earned. Martha didn't believe that she should be given any special advantages because she ticks certain boxes, unlike what most third-wave feminists and social justice warriors believe. She wanted to be a doctor, but she knew she would have to earn that title, that it wasn't something that was going to be handed to her. Next, the video pretty much disproves its entire argument without even realizing it.
You can find examples of heavy-handedness in the last few years. In the Series 9 finale, Hellbent, the Doctor, our hero, shoots a man to death. The General then regenerates into a black woman. This is all fine, by the way, the gender race change, not the shooting of a man. But she then proceeds to make problematic comments about being a man. While intended to be funny, Stephen Moffat has a history of writing sitcoms playing with gender stereotypes. It comes across as crass, smug, and probably isn't helping. Sorry, Stephen.
Actually, this clip is where Doctor Who made its intentions clear. It isn't the only time a comment like this had been included in the program, but this was the most egregious. This was when it became clear that Doctor Who had become less about a man who travels through time in a police box and more about ideology. This video was intended to demonstrate how Doctor Who is not a feminist program, but it has failed to do that. It fails to set the parameters of its argument and its categories of analysis by failing to provide a clear definition of feminism. The examples drawn in its overly vague introduction only center upon first and second wave feminism. Doctor Who, over the past 3 or 4 years, has become completely entrenched in third wave feminism. This video glosses over this. Even a cursory look at modern feminist movements prove that they have very little, if anything, to do about equality. The supporting evidence in this video is also weak. Yes, the Doctor fought the mean Daleks, but they weren't part of a politically divisive and damaging social movement. Also, using Captain Jack as a point of reference merely serves to demonstrate how far the show has fallen when you compare him to Bill. And that's it for today. So as always, everyone, thank you for watching, and have a good day.